Sure, you've seen resin projects that glow. Creators will drill holes and insert LEDs or other types of lights, but that's kind of complicated. In today's video, I'm going to show you a much easier way of giving your resin a gorgeous inner glow. Hi there, Sandy here. Welcome to another creative video at keepsakecrafts.net. The nice folks at Let's Resin sent me some of their resin as well as some of their molds. Actually, they sent me a set of 3 succulent molds. You could probably tell I have been having way too much fun playing and experimenting with these, and I came across a gorgeous effect that gives your pieces the look of an inner glow. Can you see this? This is clear resin, but because of the way I poured it, it has this beautiful glow. Now, depending on the kind of mold you have, you will get different amounts of and different glowing effects. I also figured out a couple other ways to get resin to glow, and I will share all of these with you. This is the set of 3 succulent molds that Let's Resin sent me. There are these 2, and then this one, which I didn't use as much. I made a couple pieces with it, only because it's so big and it used a lot of resin. This one uses a full 1/4 cup of resin, where these only use about a tablespoon of resin each. To get this glowing effect, it couldn't be much simpler. Because these molds are soft and kind of squidgy, I recommend you put them on some kind of firm surface. On that, I have some wax paper, just to protect it. And all you are going to do is fill up your molds with resin. This can be 2-part resin or it can be UV resin. You're going to fill it up most of the way, leaving maybe a 1/4 of an inch, maybe a little bit less at the top. Now, this mold is interesting. When I first poured it, I thought I had made a mistake and over poured. But actually, these little edges are part of the mold, which is kind of interesting. But once I figured that out, I opted not to use it. I didn't love it. So I poured shy of that, which you can do in any of these. I mean, you could pour just half of this and have a little bitty one. So keep that in mind. So I'm going to pour this. Yeah, that's good. I don't know if you can, well, not once I tilt it, you can't see, but I've poured it to within about a 1/4 of an inch of that top edge of where the plant starts. And I'm going to do the same with this one. And here's an example you can see clearly. This one, of course, has lots of ins and outs and dips. So you'll want to pour nice and slowly. And what I did was I poured these, because these are UV resin, I poured these and then walked away and let the bubbles, because especially with this one, with all these deep points, there will be a lot of bubbles. I kind of squidged it. There don't seem to be too many today, but some days there are more. If you pour it slowly, you'll have less. And I'll do the same with this. Pour it to about a 1/4 of an inch from the top. Now, if you have a different mold, you'll have to experiment to see if you can get this effect. Oh, there was a big bubble. You want some area at the base, because it's this layer here that gives this the glowing effect. Can you see? That is clear. And then it just has this layer at the bottom, and you can see it glows. Isn't that cool? It looks like there's a light in there. I just love it. So a little bit more about these ones. I did clear UV resin in all of them, and these 2 have mica powder mixed in. 2 different colors. I just was experimenting with kind of a medium tone and a very light tone, and in this case you get a very soft effect. It's still there, but I think the bright colors work out better. And even this one, you can see the darker green, but I just really love using the bright colors here. Now these 2, these ones are my favorites. I did these with Chameleon powders. These are nail art powders. And I'll have a link to these. They just have this amazing sparkle. Some of them have more of a color shift than others. They also come in sets like this, and I am not opening this package. I'm sorry. One does not simply clean up glitter. What a mess. But you can kind of see as I tilt this, you do get a bit of a color shift effect. These are messy, so when you pull these out, you'll just, yeah, be prepared to clean up a mess after. So the next step, once these are poured and you've let them sit long enough that all the bubbles have risen to the top and popped, then you can cure them. Because this is a UV resin, you can put them out in the sun or you can put them under a UV lamp. Just follow the directions on whatever brand of resin you have to cure your pieces. While we're waiting for those molds to cure, I did want to say a few things about the nice folks who sent me these resin molds and the resin. I've been really happy with this resin. It's cured beautifully. I was also super happy. The bottle came with this cap, but they included this nozzle, which is fantastically awesome. And I realized that that will also fit on my Magic Gloss bottle. It's the same size, so that just makes me so very happy. It made things so much easier having this nozzle. Also, I've been playing with this resin for like 6 weeks now, and I only just pulled out the instruction sheet that comes in the box. And they actually have some really good tips and tricks and troubleshooting, helpful things, whereas often these instruction sheets are trying so hard to be, I don't know what, that they're not helpful. But I thought this was great. So thanks again. And also, while I'm at it, I will show you the other succulent mold, which I think is lovely. Like I said, it's just big and used 4 times as much resin as the other ones. And since I was doing a lot of experimenting, I decided not to use it. As I mentioned with the other mold, you can get a variety of looks with your molds. You don't have to use them just as is. Here's one that was a little bit of a fail, but I wanted to play with something with this mold and I didn't want to use as much resin, so I only filled it up about halfway. And if this hadn't failed, it would be a perfectly usable piece, just a different size. All right, here are my molds back from a little time in the sun, and they're all cured. And now the trick here is to add something that's going to shine through the bottom and give you this glowing effect. Like I said, I definitely prefer brighter and darker colors to lighter ones, although that is a really pretty pale effect. As you can see, it's clear here. You can see that light green. But I'm going to try, I went through my mica powders and just pulled out like the darkest and brightest that I could find. So this fuchsia is pretty bright. Now if you're working with UV resin, you want to take care that this is on the bottom and your resin is on the top. And you don't want to put too much. I actually had an issue with this one. I had made it, I had let it sit for weeks, and I picked it up and I was messing with it, and can you see? Let me see if I squeeze. Oh, it was coming out. It was like oozing out. And it was all wet. It had not cured. Now I suppose if your piece is thoroughly sealed, then as long as it never breaks, it doesn't matter if it doesn't cure, but it could definitely make a big mess. So I put just a scoop of these mica powders in here. And then I'll put a drop of my resin and mix it in. You can do the same thing with your Chameleon powders. They'll be a little bit more sparkly, which I don't know that it makes a big difference in the glowing effect. But if you have a color that you like better in that, then go ahead and use that. While I'm doing this, I just wanted to let you know that in order to preserve my health and my sanity, I'm cutting back my publishing schedule on YouTube to twice a month. The good news for you is that if you love my tutorials, I also make 2 videos a month exclusively for my patrons. You can learn more about that at patreon.com. And I just have to give many, many thanks to those of you who are already patrons of my art. It's so helpful and encouraging to me to continue making things I love and share them with you. So once that's thoroughly mixed, and I'm going to try to get it into all the edges, now you can top off the rest of the mold with more of your resin. And because this is clear, this should cure just fine. And then back under your light or out in the sun. And I decided to try this one just because it was like one of the darkest that I had, but still kind of a bright color. So, oh, making a mess. So a scoop, maybe, what is that, 1/4 of a teaspoon? There. And just like with the other one, we'll top it off. Fill it up to the depth that I want. And go cure those again. So these have cured. Let's see what we've got. Let's see. All right. Ooh, that's pretty cool. I mean, blue is an unusual color for a succulent, but you can see how the dark color really, really glows. It's clear. Isn't that amazing? And then you turn it like this, and you just get this amazing inner glow. Let's see how this one turned out. Ooh, isn't that pretty? You get that amazing glow. Now before you go, let me show you a few other ways to get a glowing effect. It's more of an outer glow than an inner glow, but there's a couple other things I came up with while I was experimenting. And one is to take your mold, turn it inside out as best you can. Some are easier to do than others. Like this one turns inside out beautifully. And then dust it with pastel powders. So this is clear resin, and this I tinted a little bit. This was epoxy resin that I tinted, and I dusted them with white pastel powders. Now one thing to look at, this was one of the first ones I did, I just kind of shoved the pastels down into the points of this. I hadn't realized I could actually turn it inside out at the time, so I was shoving it down in there, and so little chunks of pastel were in there where the resin couldn't get, and it left these voids. It's still really cute. So I dusted it with white pastels, and then after I demolded it, I went over the edges with green pastels and the tips with pink. And this one, the same thing. I went over it with some light green and then dark green on the very edges. And that really has kind of a glowing effect. Depending on what you're going to do with these that are dusted with pastels, you probably want to seal them. I sealed this with just a satin sealer because the pastels, it's just on plastic. If you picture it, the resin is a plastic, and they will come off. If you're just going to use it for home dec, maybe you don't need to. It depends on what you're going to do with it. Not so much the pastels that you brushed on before, that you brushed into the mold, but the pastels that you add afterwards are the ones that will come off. The ones that you brush on, except for an excess outer layer that you can wipe off, they're embedded in resin, so they won't come off. But I liked accenting them with some darker colors. So that's really a cool kind of inner glow that you get using pastels. Another way you can get a glow, like I said, it's more of an outer glow than an inner glow, is to dust the molds with Chameleon powders. So what you want to do is turn it inside out. Now this one stays inside out, it's really easy. This one you kind of have to hold inside out and do areas. What you want to do is get your Chameleon powder and really burnish it into all the surfaces of your mold. So this takes a little bit of time, and just rub it in so that it's stuck, because the silicone is naturally sticky and you're going to end up glitterified. You just are. You and your area and pets in the vicinity, everybody's going to end up glittery. So you just burnish it in, and then once you have the whole thing covered, you can fill it with resin, and you'll end up with something like this or this. And again, I went back in with white pastels and did the edges because I just love the contrast and the effect. You don't get quite as much of an effect, but it's sort of pretty and does have a bit of a glow. This is, again, tinted and clear, and I brushed these with mica powders. So the look is definitely more subtle, but still really pretty and glowy. Now in this case, these both had the same color of resin as a base. Again, this is epoxy resin, not UV, because I don't think it would work with UV resin. And I dusted the insides of the molds with this color and this one with this color. This doesn't really glow, but it's very pretty, a different effect than you might expect. And in this case, I actually used, again, epoxy resin. I used black resin, but the exact same colors dusted on the molds. So you can see that you do get a bit of a different look. Now that you've learned this technique, you'll want to learn more ways to create with resin. You can do just that by clicking on the resin playlist I put together in the upper right.